It was the early 80s. I lived in a little town called Cullman, Alabama. Bear Bryant had just died, and that was our national hero in North Alabama because football was as big as church. In fact, football was a religion to a lot of people, my family included. Not my immediate family. My dad was a preacher. But I'm talking about my aunts and uncles and grandparents and everybody else. So when he died, well, it felt like somebody we knew had died. People lined up for miles up and down the interstate as his car slowly passed by. He was ultimately buried in a cemetery off Green Springs Avenue in Birmingham, Alabama, just about a stone's throw from where my great-granddaddy was buried. This town was a special place because it's a place where I learned to dig deep. I learned what it meant to dig deeper than ever before. If you want to be anything, if you want to do anything in this world, you got to learn to dig deeper than you've ever dug before. You got to learn to step past what people say about you. And you got to believe in yourself more than others believe about you. This was the time when if your name wasn't something special, coaches didn't even give you a second look. It didn't matter how good you were at a sport. The coaches only cared about the last names. That was apparent. I began to notice the discrimination in the 8th grade. Before that, I thought maybe I just wasn't that good. Maybe I just kept getting cut from all the teams because I just wasn't good enough. But then 4 things happened that let me know there was something wrong with Cullman Middle School and high school, and that there was definitely a lot of bias going on. And either they had the dumbest coaches that ever existed, or they were definitely playing favorites with people that had big names in the community. And that's exactly what they were doing. I confronted a coach one day, the basketball and track coach. And I said to him, "There's no doubt I'm better than half the kids on your team. I don't even think you look at the list of people when you go to cutting. I think you've already got circled out who's on your team when we have tryouts. And what I think is every night you just do your thing to make it look like you're doing your job, and you knock a few more names off. But the truth is you already knew what your team was before we even had the tryouts to begin with." Well, he gave me a look. To my shock and amazement, he said, "That's true. I do already know my team. And it would be a surprise if anybody ever made the team in one of these tryouts, but they make us have them anyway." Those was fighting words. I mean fighting words right there. Because I knew he meant it. At that point, I knew he wasn't just saying something to be saying it. I knew he meant it. He wanted me to know that he already knew what his team was and I wasn't on it. And he wanted me to know the fact is, at Cullman High School, it's about your last name. It's about who your parents are. It's about who's got money. It's not about talent. And there might be a reason they've never won a state championship in very much. I don't think they've ever won a football state championship. They've won some baseball ones. But they have never done anything in track, really, to speak of, and much else, really. Because they're not about what it takes to be a program that's going to be great. And they never have been that. And that's a sad reality. He said something that day that stuck with me. He said something that hurt that day. It was something that was real that day. And that day, I decided, you know what? I'm going to make it my life's mission to destroy that school. I didn't know if he said that for shock value or if he really meant it. But it seemed like they meant it. But it seemed like it was definitely true. I decided I was going to work every day to prove it was true. You see, I was going to become the fastest runner, the highest jumper, and the best athlete in that school. And I was going to lay everything down that I had and dig deep, find out what I could do. I already knew I was fast, no question about that. I already knew I could jump high. There was a lot of things I already knew. And I knew if I just had a little bit of practice at the sport itself, my athleticism would outdo everybody else's, because I was faster than they were and I could jump higher, to let me know that something rotten was going on. The first thing that happened is the fact that something happened to me that never happened before in my life. I won something. Out of 100 kids in our entire class. Now, granted, those that were on the athletic team that was in season at the time did not come to our PE class. But those who were playing a different sport that wasn't in season did come to PE. So all year long, I competed against athletes that were on the school team at one time or another. And I was shocked when it was time to wrestle. During wrestling season, in PE class that is, he trained us the correct way to do it. And then he began a tournament. And he seeded everybody, not based on what he really thought they could do, but based on who he thought was the strongest and how quick he thought they might lose. And he put me up against a guy named Scott Gardner. This guy was shorter than I was. As far as I could tell, we probably weighed about the same. He couldn't run as fast as I could. He couldn't jump as fast as I could. But he was probably one of the smartest kids in the school. And he was probably one of the most popular also. For whatever reason, he never liked me. And I think it was because I wasn't in the popular group. And if you're not in, that puts you out. And what he didn't know is he had a tornado about to come his way. Because I was going to prove to that coach that I had what it took. When I saw Scott Gardner, I did not look and have any fear in my body at all. When I looked at Scott Gardner, I did not see a person with the ability to beat me. When I looked at Scott Gardner, I saw a coach that was stupid enough to put somebody up against me who cared more about what his hair looked like and what his clothes looked like than he did about playing any sports, although he did play several sports growing up. We started the match with him on top and me on bottom. The whistle was blown, and like a flash of lightning, I threw him off the entire mat. This was a shocker to everybody that was watching. Suddenly, everybody began to gather around, like, what the heck just happened? And somebody said, Harrison, what just got into you? And then we switched, and I was on top, and he was on bottom. And suddenly we began to fight. This time it was more like a real fight. He was trying to hurt me, and I could tell it. And I started trying to hurt him back. And there was no fear. And we started going all over the place. And it was one person after another getting after each other, to the point where the coach actually gave the first ever very elusive compliment. He said, now this is what it's all about, putting on a show. This is how you're supposed to wrestle. Right after he said that, I took Scott Gardner and I suplexed him and landed backwards, slamming him to the floor mat. On and on I slammed him until the bell rung, and the bell rung to end the class while I was up 4 points to 0. We went back to quickly take a shower and get our clothes on, and that's when I heard one of the kids say to Scott, "Harrison kicked your ass today." He said, "I don't care about that stuff." He said, "No, man, I'm serious. He whipped your ass." That was one of the biggest ass whooping I've ever seen in my life. And I felt myself begin to swell. I felt everything rush to my head. I suddenly got addicted to the feeling of the fact that I just whipped somebody, and I whipped them really, really good. Next day, I whipped another kid. The next day, I whipped another kid. Next thing you know, I was in the semifinals. But then I began to be afraid because I saw if I won today, that means tomorrow I had to fight a kid named Jesse. And Jesse was my friend. Jesse was a good guy. He was the guy that treated me well, even though we were in different classes, so to speak, classes of people. He was well liked, popular. He was an athlete on the baseball team and the football team. And I knew he was going to whip me in the championship match if I won that day. So I was a little bit afraid. But when it came time to fight in the semifinals, I destroyed the guy as if I wanted to play Jesse. You would have thought I wanted to play him. Jesse had a harder time getting to the championship. He had some close matches that he almost lost. But in every single match I played, nobody came within 4 points of me. It was total domination. Finally, the day came when Jesse and I had to match up. Suddenly, he was no longer a friend. He was an enemy. I noticed he didn't talk to me that day. I tried to be friendly. He wasn't friendly back. That was the first time I realized if you're going to be an athlete, you can't like the person that you're competing against. At least not when you're about to compete. So guess what? I took on the same attitude. I decided Jesse wasn't my friend anymore, and I was going to do everything I could to embarrass him. I went out there, and when the whistle blown, something else took over my body. It was like I went outside my body and watched the match from outside my body. He was a great athlete. He was a somebody. He was a big name. He was somebody people revered. He was fast, powerful, strong. And yet I demolished him like I did everybody else. It was fast. It was furious. It was violent. Most of all, it was over quick. The coach gave a big congratulations to me as I won my weight class. And there was only 3 weight classes among 100 kids. So in our division, there was about 35 kids. And I had won number 1 wrestler out of 35 kids. That was no small feat. But there was a lot more to come to show me I was a lot better than what the coach had been letting on. Stay tuned next week as I win the President Fitness Award and make their football team look foolish, and still the coach don't want none of this.